Today I get to speak with Prasant Radhakrishnan, a saxophonist, a music educator, a spiritual being, a friend, and someone who I deeply respect. So thank you, Prasant, for being here on my podcast.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Great to see you, Ramya, as always.
Likewise, Prasant. So, Prasant, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up?
I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, in the U.S. So spent my entire youth there until I went to college. And during my teens, I started studying music with my music guru, Calmness, sir. Went to college in LA, and then continued to go to India frequently in between to learn and perform. I lived in India for a while, mostly in Chennai and other parts of Tamil Nadu, and then returned back to the US. Worked for a while in a corporate job.
Oh, I didn't know this.
Brief stint for about 1.5 years, and then that made it very clear to me, at least, to go into music. So I went into music, and then things just kind of unfolded from there.
I did not know that. So what did you work as? Like, which sector were you working in?
I actually worked as a corporate investigator. So kind of an unusual sounding thing, but it was an office job, kind of a desk job. So yeah, I did that for about 1.5 years. Not very long.
and that's when you decided to switch.
That's right. Yeah, to go full time. So before that, I was kind of semi full time into music anyway. I had just come back from being in India on this fellowship. I was there for about 1 year, and just focusing on music. And came back, and I wanted to, from my folks wanted me to, get a proper job, and and so I thought, let me also consider it. Let me not just brush it aside, So I thought I'd do that. And it also, I think it served a good purpose, because that's what brought me out to the Bay Area. So I got this job. I was based in San Francisco. As I mentioned, I grew up in Phoenix. So I hadn't really considered moving to the Bay Area. My sister was here at the time. So those things combined, I ended up getting a job in San Francisco, and that's how I moved out here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I wasn't very happy in that.
Yeah.
So it's something I noticed. I was just, something didn't feel right. The job was fine, and I was doing well, and people were really nice, and everything was good about it, but it didn't feel right to me. So I think after a little while, it became clear, okay, this is not going to work.
Yeah. So growing up as an immigrant, right, in the United States, I guess you were first generation, second generation, right? So how is the influence how did the musical influence really happen?
That's thanks to my parents. In the house, they were always playing music. So my parents, of course, came from India and settled down. So all of their musical tastes were, not all, but largely from India. So they were more into like film music and bhajans, and also some Carnatic music as well. My mom studied a little bit of Veena when she was younger. My grandmother had learned Carnatic music. They didn't go into it very heavily, but they were definitely fans and very much interested in music. So we heard a lot of Carnatic music as well growing up. We had Phoenix, we had a small music community as well. They used to host concerts. So we kind of grew up going to Fine Arts Association, I think it was called. So we used to get to see artists from India performing Carnatic music when I was growing up. So I got that exposure pretty young, thanks to my parents and the community as well.
Okay, I see. And then during your teens is when you decided to learn from your guru, and you moved to India for a bit. That's when that happened.
Yeah. I really feel like it was kind of a lot of things happening at the same time. I can't really say I decided. I took the step to go with it, but a lot of things took place for it to happen. It wasn't kind of my initial say, hey, I want to learn this, and can you make it happen? Sort of a bunch of things happened. So Gadri sir, my teacher, he was visiting Phoenix and staying at a friend of ours, staying at their house for a concert. And she was a Veena artist, and we knew her really well. And so she happened to know I was playing saxophone in my school band and things like that. And so she said, hey, like, Kadri Gopalnath sir is here. Why don't you meet him? Just meet him and take a lesson with him. So we did that, and it just kind of opened up from there. I had no idea what was happening when I went and met him, so.
Isn't that amazing? Like, things just happen sometimes. And those are the best, right? That just happen without us doing anything about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. So, what made you choose the saxophone? So you said you chose you just played saxophone in school. But it seems like there's, when one meets you, it's just implied that, you and the saxophone are almost one together, because you're so in one with it, so to speak. So did you make a conscious choice while choosing it, or was it just something, like you said, that happened and then it just happened to grow on you?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. I mean, I actually remember the moment, which I often don't remember specific things like this, but I happen to remember the moment when my dad asked me, your school band, you can pick any instrument you want to join the school band. And I immediately just said saxophone. and I still remember that, and I was very sure about it, and I really don't know why. I don't have a reason for it. I just remember being very clear that I wanted to learn saxophone. He said, are you sure? There's so many options. There's flute, there's this, trumpet, there's so many different things. I was like, no, saxophone. And so I just remember being very clear about it. But there wasn't a thing that I had seen it and I was dazzled by it. Or a lot of great musicians, if you hear them talking about it, they usually have a story like that.
Yeah.
For me, I had been exposed to it, but I didn't have, that wasn't really the moment or anything. Just kind of, again, it just sort of happened. I was just watching it happen. And then but I was definitely, I wanted to do it as well. So I enjoyed that experience.
So when one listens to you play the saxophone, there is a sound that is very different. It's unique, right? What is it that makes that sound so unique when you play? Was that a technique that you found out, or was it something that just grew over you again and you're still learning how to do it? It's definitely a unique sound when you play the saxophone as opposed to when someone else is, and it could be because of the two traditions, the Carnatic and the jazz traditions mixing, or it could just be the sound by itself. And I think for me, the sound itself is it's very deep, it's close to earth. And so what is it? Is there a specific technique that you use?
Thank you. There isn't a really specific technique. Generally, at least on a surface level, the sound, or even on a deeper level, the sound is just kind of who that being is. So if you listen to a lot of saxophonists, if you listen to them enough, you can usually recognize who it is, even if they just play a few notes. A lot of the great saxophone players, they have a very recognizable sound. So it's largely, it's almost like our human voice. A lot of people say that the saxophone is very close to our voice. It's the timbre of the instrument. So it could just be that that's just the sound that happens to come out of my playing, Of course, we have a feeling and a sound that we're going for that during the practice period. So, of course, practice is always happening still. But in the earlier formative years, you kind of listen to a lot of great artists and imbibe their sound. So it could be an amalgam of all those, plus just who I am coming through the instrument. And then after a certain point, there was a phase where I just felt I was no longer searching for a particular sound, but I was just letting it be what it is going to be. So that's part of it, I suppose.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. I think that makes total sense, right? It's the energy of the being that comes out in the sound, right? Whether it's voice or and I guess with saxophone there's a direct relation to your breath, right? So
Yes.
yeah. Okay. And so apart from music, Prashant, when one meets you, one is really struck by how calm you are, how composed you are. And I'm sure everyone who meets you says the same thing. Is that your natural being? Is that who you are? Is that something you work towards? Because I know you're very spiritually inclined. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, thank you. I mean, I'm fortunate that I was calm.
Yeah.
It's just weird. I guess the calmness comes from just being who we are. So you, as you kind of go within yourself and discover more of what you're not, which is usually the mind of thoughts and the concepts about what we are, then you do come to a resting place, which is just a feeling of being that doesn't have any ideas about what I am or what I'm not. You just rest in pure feeling of being. And then the sense of being a particular identity kind of falls away. So I guess there could be a sense of calm that comes over that is a result of that. But I wouldn't say that not being calm is bad or something.
Is it also music that played an influence in this calmness?
I'm sure it has. I think music has been a huge part of my journey. Anyone who's involved in music, as I'm sure you experience as well, it's hugely transforming. And one of the things I want to share with people going forward is how powerful it is as an agent of getting to our own nature and getting to that peace, which is just very, very ever present. So that feeling of having to fix something or jump away, run into something else, kind of gets dissolved in that. And music being arising from sound, and the sound is much more powerful than a lot of techniques that can help you become calm, because it's not necessarily related to thinking. So it helps us to get into a deeper place within ourselves where thought is not ruling what we're doing. And then we kind of get to taste that experientially instead of sort of thinking about it or talking about it. And so I think that makes a huge impact. But of course, if you're with music traditions, at first it's sort of like an aesthetic thing. So you're practicing and you're learning a tradition and things like that. And then I think there's another arc to it, which a lot of people aren't aware of yet, which I would love for more people to know about, which is where the music itself dissolves into pure sound, and then the sound dissolves into our own being. So I would love for people to take that last part of the arc, which is which we can forget about, or maybe not know about, those of us who are practicing music or listening to music.
So is that time bound to reach that space? Like, say, one's practicing for some time.
25 minutes, you're asking, like, would you be able to reach a certain level of calm?
Yeah, is that time bound is where it dissolves into sound and purity? Because I guess my question is, a lot of the musicians, we get, very bogged down by the technical aspect of it.
Yes.
So,
exactly.
Right? So how do you disassociate from that? It's funny, it's like the egg and the chicken thing, right? So you have to become a musician, you learn all these techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually you have to go back to sound. So where's that, when technique and sound and purity, when they all merge, that must be that must be the bliss, right? Which you're talking about, which is just purity. And
Yeah.
a lot of the musicians don't get to that space. Is it because they just don't allow themselves? Because I'm sure, musically they're very proficient.
Yeah. It's more it's kind of like an inner tug that eventually happens when you're what you're interested in. So the music itself, I mean, actually any experience, not even music, but any experience we have has the possibility of blossoming or kind of bringing us into our natural pure awareness. Any experience, it could be having a sip of water, but it depends on what we're focused on and what do we want. So when you're practicing music, most people are focused on the outer result of that. So it could be, it's also the way our society is structured. So you do things and then you have to achieve a result, like, perform a concert. Or if you're not interested in performing, people want to learn a certain number of compositions. Maybe they want to learn X number of songs and they have a list of songs they want to learn, So the trajectory, or you could say the intention in their mind, is to get something external through the music. So the music is highly purifying to the mind aesthetically. So person who practices a nice music, they will definitely find benefits in their life. And that's why a lot of people take it up. But they may not find them like their core source of their being, which they eventually will, just by over time. But if you want to find your own nature and you go with that, then you will. But I would say, most artists or practitioners don't find it because they're really focused on the external result of what they're doing with the sound, rather than what is the sound made of. And can I explore the sound itself or the music itself in a totally, in a way that doesn't involve my adding concepts and thoughts about what it is.
Yeah.
So you sort of discard all of those, and you go into a pure experiencing of the sound. So when you have pure experiencing of the sound, it's almost like a baby or a child. Having a pure experience with no concept added on top of it. And that's when we can discover our nature, which is, what's aware of the sound. And that turns out to be our own awareness, just a pure awareness or a feeling of being. And then we recognize that we can actually rest in that being and stay there. And that turns out to fulfill all of the stuff we thought we wanted before. So then the things that we wanted before kind of fall away as irrelevant because you found where they all came from. It turned out to be our own self. And so that's the bit that some of us miss.
That's going to take 5-10 minutes for most people to. I'm going to replay. Let me listen to that again. But that's so deep. That's
what we want. Anyone who listening to this would love you to explore that, simply by just recognizing that whatever you're looking for in any activity is actually just to taste your own self, like to recognize what you are. And because just being a separate person, it usually causes most of the pain that we're having, or the unhappiness, feeling of being separated.
Yeah, that's and that's an important thing to talk about, because so I work with children and so do you, and so we see the next the wave of kids kind of coming in, and from what I see, a lot of the problems or the issues is what you just said. It's like this separating who you are from, well, I have to achieve this, I have to get to this place. Oh my god, I can't practice for half an hour because I have 10 other things going on.
Oh yeah.
Or just not just music. I mean, there's so many threats, and there's so much expectation from children, and what is it that's going to help them manage all of this, right? So It's a question I think about. I actually stay up sometimes and wonder what, like my own kids, like how are they going to deal with all these expectations? And I think part of what you do is also is like a satsang, right, where you talk about all of this, which is so. If you think about it, it probably is the most important thing, right? Because that's what they'll be able to manage when they, right? So can you tell us a little bit about the satsangs that you do?
Yes, of course. Yeah, the satsang is basically a place where we can gather together and go into the reality of what this truth is that we're talking about. Where it's really not complicated or anything, but it's just discovering what we are, as we've been talking about here. But I include a little bit of music in it because that helps. It helps helps us to go deeper than our mind, which is the thoughts and the emotions, sensations, and all that, the identification with those. And that gives rise to the feeling of unsettling feeling of there being something wrong, unhappiness, etc. So in the satsang, you have a sort of a music meditation. So I play a little bit and then talk, we talk a little bit about this direct approach to recognizing what we are just by virtue of being, and the different approaches. I particularly like to share the teachings of Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, which are very direct in their approach by, inquiring who is having this experience or who am I, or simply just abiding as the feeling of being. Now it's a perfect and wonderful approach, but in today's world, a lot of people have a difficult time doing it. And that's why I included the music part, because what I've been finding from my experience is that you're able to go much deeper, much easier, and much quicker. So you had mentioned about the time-bound aspect of it. So our own nature definitely is beyond any concept of time.
Right.
So it's just a pure being where time and space and the separation dissolve and or have never been there, you could say. So like a child that has no idea what time it is, or like a small child, they're not thinking about what time it is. It's a construct that we've added. Now the interesting thing is we've gotten so deep into that construct that we're very much based on time and thoughts and what we're doing next. And if we're not doing that, we're thinking about what had we done, So interestingly, music takes place in time, like in a canvas of time, right? Because it's moving at a rate within time. So if you look at a music track, it's X number of minutes long. But what's very powerful about that, which I consider the first step of getting us back to this pure being through sound, which is recognizing that music, anytime we listen or practice music, it brings us into this present experience of the now, you could say, just or feeling of being here in this moment. And what that essentially, everyone's always in the moment, but it's just that you might be thinking about something else.
Well, I think physically in the moment, but
mentally
everywhere
somewhere else.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you hear the sound, it's that mental part that's going here and there focuses in on the sound, and it's just right here. And so we enjoy that, and the mind enjoys it. So as opposed to, another approach, which might be very physically demanding, or difficult, or, sitting in meditation for 12 hours or something like that. And this one, the mind actually enjoys that, provided it kind of likes the music. So mind enjoying that, then if you take these next steps, which is allowing the sound to just dissolving into the sound. So instead of reaching out and grabbing the sound with your mind, you actually let the sound dissolve your feeling of whatever you're feeling. And then you go further and discover your own being, where the sound is coming from. So anyway, that's the technique that I'm sharing these days.
It reminds me of a quote by, I think it was A.R. Rahman, who said, when you're in the being of music, your joys, your sorrows, everything kind of gets immersed. It just dissolves in it.
Absolutely.
Sort of what you're saying. So it's
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what it is. So there's no up, down, nothing. This is just being. I guess that's the word for it. So it's just
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're enjoying it, your mind is kind of it's like dancing with the music. It's like tasting it, it's like, when you taste some food or something, it's enjoying it, and it's experiencing it like it's a separate thing. And then after some time, if you're kind of open to it, or you're, the feeling, the readiness is there, the music will just dissolve you. So there has to be some openness for that. So that people will feel that once in a while. So if that's why people love going to, say concerts or dance parties or whatever it is, because they've had that feeling before, where they completely dissolved into the experience. So we get that feeling, then we go a little bit further and recognize that feeling's actually arising within us. So it wasn't that external experience that gave it to us, but it's actually our own nature that's giving us that feeling of peace. And then there ends the problem, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's and I think that's why I love teaching kids, because they come with this openness.
Yeah.
By the time we're adults, I think that openness sort of just it's not as ready. We're not as ready to receive as when we're kids. But the kids, I can almost feel like, even it's on Zoom, I can feel like their consciousness levels are in a different it's in a different plane than adults, and I wonder whether that's society that makes that change in us. Some of us are able to escape it, and I guess, and I wouldn't even generalize it saying that all musicians and artists escape that, because I know a lot of musicians and artists who can't escape that. So
yeah,
I wonder what it is.
Yeah, as far as people are able to kind of hear their own inner voice, you could say, or their inner guide, and follow that, they're able to not fall into the societal construct too much. If you're too much, follow, it depends on who's guiding you. I mean, if you have following all of those things and you feel that, then it becomes more restrictive, right? But yeah, generally the society, if you want to say society, is a very general term. You don't want to say it's bad or anything like that. But there's a general pull to be a separate person, going out and trying to survive and trying to make it in this world. It's like a harsh world or something, and going within and recognizing our nature seems to be completely at odds with that at first. So at some point,
absolutely. So it's just human nature to say, hey, that's not sustainable, or whatever that is.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, if we're resting, if we're able to kind of hear our own heart, you could say, our own deeper part of ourselves, that will definitely guide us to recognizing what we are, because that's what we are. We always want to be what we are. But the society, or you could say the external pressures that may show up, it creates further, could potentially create different thoughts and different pressures where people are like, oh, I have to do this, or I should do this, or I shouldn't do that. And that creates more and more mind stuff.
Yeah. So I guess for children who are listening in, right, that's something to pay attention to. And I think the promo of my last episode was also about this particular thing you just said about listening to your inner voice. No one really told me to do that when I was little, and not that anyone's not anyone's fault, but I think it's just something that's, as a collective, that to be more aware of, right?
Yes.
That if you're hearing something, obviously there has to be initially a judgment. Is this a right thing to do or a wrong thing to do? So that's one step, again, you have to cross. But then if your voice is telling you something over and over again, that has to mean something. And, and that's who you are, right? That's that voice.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I've noticed with some of the more popular pop culture movies and things for kids, I've noticed that started to change lately. Like there's more of a message to listen to your inner calling and, be who you are and things. I've noticed that because I've got 2 little kids and, I see the kind of stuff they're watching, and there's definitely more emphasis on that. So I think that's something positive. And then this understanding of, recognize what we are, which is beyond our concept of a particular person or an identity. Recognize the pure awareness. If people do learn this early and understand fundamentally what they are early, and have that as kind of like a background current throughout their life, then you really can do anything in your life and pursue whatever you want to pursue. You won't have the inner turmoil. If you discover that. Yeah.
Wow, that's so amazing. So Prasant, what is it how do you surrender? So we talked a little bit about how you surrender to art. So I think that's sort of implied, right? And that's what gives you, is there something other than music that gives you peace?
Well, really, it's kind of what we were talking about before. It's just the essence of being ourselves, because we are actually the peace. So like our own nature is the peace, the source of that peace. So the more, when we get to discover that, then every experience we have is like giving us peace. So it's
well, that's the key, right? That's what you were saying.
Yeah, it's kind of like a nonstop peace. It doesn't mean that every experience I have is pleasant.
Right.
So I don't want to give people that impression that I always experience only very pleasant, like, fantastic things. Is there's definitely things that people might see like, oh, that doesn't look like he's having a good time. But there's something there's like something always there that's always at peace. It doesn't need peace to be peaceful, if that makes any sense. So that's why they say, and there's a quote of the peace that passeth understanding, or something like that. And that it's beyond understanding what we think peace is. And the easiest way to describe it is simply just being what we are. So that when any of us are doing that, which is not a doing, but just what we already are being, you really do find peace in literally anything and everything. It's just a constant enjoyment of that. But I will say, from what you were mentioning, that music is a very beautiful experience and a very one that has a very amplified effect, and because all of our faculties get absorbed in that. So so it's something I highly recommend.
It's the ultimate brain workout, right? And ironically, the workout is not strenuous workout. It's like you're literally using every part of your brain to, whether it is calming or whether it's thinking, not thinking. It's all this huge ball of
everything is activated, but it's of course, depending on the type of music you're playing or what you're looking to create when you're playing. But regardless, it does involve your complete focus and concentration. And then at the same time, there's an entry into the feeling of non-doing, actually. So when you're doing all of that, I'm sure you've seen like a lot of the famous musicians, and they've had moments of where they recognized they were not playing, like it was just happening.
It's just happening,
Yeah, it was just happening.
Yeah.
So that's a glimpse of what we're talking about. And if you continue to follow like that hint, then that becomes the norm, basically. And so it's like doing while not doing. That's very, very enjoyable experience.
Yeah. So that's like ultimate surrender, and that's taking on, right? It's just taking on its own.
Absolutely. So you kind of, it's a great way to practice music. So for those of us, those of you who are music practitioners, I highly recommend to, aside from the stuff which requires you to execute something very particular, to use one of the modalities in whatever music form you're doing, which has a little bit more open space to it, like in Carnatic music, like Raga Alapana or Swara Kalpana, maybe without having to execute a particular korbe or a particular kind of thing, but just having it be more free-flowing. And if you do that without setting any particular restrictions on how it's going to be, then usually that feeling of spontaneity happens by itself in a pretty short time.
That's amazing. That's a really good tip. Yeah. So a lot of the kids I teach, and of course it's also with vocal music where the lyric is not very relatable.
Mm-hmm.
I think with I don't know what your take on that is, because I guess with the saxophone it's different, right? But you're still teaching them the song, the kriti itself.
Yeah.
Right. So kids are, why am I learning this? I don't relate to it. I don't live in the same era. I don't live in the same place, the geographical location. Why am I learning about this person when I can sing about something else, right?
Yeah.
So as a music educator and traditional Carnatic, teaching traditional Carnatic music, what do you think educators should do? Should we start thinking about new ways to teach our kids Carnatic music, or is the old way the solid way, because it seems to have worked for generations? That's something I struggle with a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. I feel like it's whatever comes naturally to you. I think each teacher is unique, each student is unique, or each group of students is unique. And times have changed, but if I look at my teaching style for Carnatic music, it's probably pretty similar to my teachers because that's how I was taught. But of course, I'm a different person, so the way I teach is going to be just a little different based on my personality. I don't have too many very strict particular things, but at the same time, if you're going to make a painting, like a kriti, for example, is more similar to, say, painting a picture of a tree, something, or a person's face. So if you want to paint a person's face, it kind of has to look like them. So whereas if you're doing something more abstract, it can be more abstract. So we're very particular about how the kriti has to be rendered. Of course, the gamakams, and so that it is that kriti that the composer made, as far as we're able to. Of course, you can never say it's going to be perfect or something.
Yeah.
As far as like, why should the younger people of today learn those? I think it's just great to expose them to, even if it is lyrics that they may not relate to, because they might relate to it 10 years from now, or they might, because even though we live in a very different time, we're in a much more intellectual focused age now, whereas the composers of Carnatic music were more spiritually focused, and within spirituality, particular approaches. So Tyagaraja was much more bhakti oriented, which I think kids growing up today, unless they're inculcated with that at a young age, will not have that that inclination, because the inclination today is to intellectually understand things. That's part of the reason why I like to combine the insight approach with music, because that'll help to bridge that gap, because today people are very intelligent and very analytical, but not a lot of people will have something like faith, inner faith. But if you recognize why things happen the way they do, then faith is or whatever, the fruit of faith is automatic. But anyway, these different approaches, Dikshithar was very different. he had all of the tantra and mantra, and plus the non-dual realization and other things. Shama Sastri, of course, his own special way. So all of these things just kind of seep in. And definitely, for example, mentioning Dikshidhar, his compositions being almost like a package of sound alchemy. It's like there's a saying that for his Kamalamba Navavarna Kritis, if you just listen to them, you'll get liberated. you'll get what we've been talking about in another word, in another way of putting it. You'll get liberated just by listening to them. So whether or not that's true, you have to experience for yourself. But it
depends on who's rendering it, right? That's also.
Yeah, but I think there is something. See, what I felt with that particular kriti, it's almost like Dikshidhar put the code in there, and he's almost like, even if you don't know what you're doing, if you sing this song, it'll have the effect, because it's almost like transmitting a message. So if I tell you the weather is 75 degrees, and then I tell that to another person, and he says the weather is 75 degrees, you still get the message. So it may have a different intensity. That person may say very softly, or a person may say very loudly, or very blurry, may not hear what he's saying properly, but the message comes across. So these are all, I'm not saying it's true or you should believe it or not believe it, but these are just things that may have an effect on our consciousness, that in ways that kids or whoever's learning it may not realize at the moment. But they might feel, oh, after I listen to this, I feel pretty good. At some point that's going to click.
At some point.
So that's something that I'm trying to share with people who a couple students, they may not be super interested in class. They're just kind of doing it. And main thing I want to impress upon, or not impress upon them, but just invite them to discover for themselves, is that it is a great benefit that you can enjoy. That you feel extremely good, and also it recharges you to do your other things. So young students who have tons of homework and activities, they practice a little bit of music for 10 minutes. They may have the energy to take on their next task. And I've had other people report that they've had that experience.
So for kids listening, that's a wonderful thing that Prasant sir just said. That he said, if that's something you can't relate to today, eventually it may or may not click. And if it clicks, it's a huge bonus. And don't you want to take that risk? Because you want to take that chance, because at some point, if it clicks, your life's just going to become a lot better. Then it's going to affect you in a good way. So why not take that chance, right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, that's amazing. The way you said about a code being encoded in a song, right? It's I never ever have thought about it like that, and that's kind of ingenious. Because at the end of the day, it is, right. Songs are messages. They're snapshots of time, but at the same time, what they felt at that point, which can stay relevant for centuries, right? So
yeah, definitely. And I feel like Tyagaraja's was the outpouring of bhakti, plus so much more depth. I don't want to keep it so surface sounding, especially for those who know so much about and have experienced Tyagaraja Kritis. But Dikshidhar was interesting. It's almost like, for kids watching, it's like you see those adventure movies where they go and they find a map somewhere, and it's like an old ancient map, and it takes you to like a particular hidden island or something like that. There's a lot of these adventure movies, So the map had everything in there, and it was still there, like 200 years later or 1,000 years later, you find this map, and then there it is. And I feel like Dikshidhar was kind of doing that with his kritis, because if you go into, and I'm not a scholar on that at all, but there are many people who are. So if you look at his different sets of kritis, they have all of these different unique kinds of syllables and particular ways of the lyrics mixing with the sounds and mixing with the notes in a very, very particular way. So his kind of kritis, it's almost like he built these very very complex pieces of, I wouldn't even say it's only music. It's like a shape, or like a complex shape through the music. It creates like a 3D image of sound or something, you could say. So that goes into our consciousness.
Consciousness, yeah. Well, I guess Tyagaraja Swami's is more, it's direct, right? It's just, it's not as cryptic. It's easier to, like Mozart,
yeah.
Say, right?
Yeah, it's easy. They used to say, I think there's a common analogy that they say Tyagaraja's kritis are like a banana. You can just easily get to it, and Dikshita is kind of like a coconut. Harder to get into. I don't know. I didn't make that one up. They have all these different analogies out there, metaphors. But I guess basically it's, the Tyagaraja kritis are much easier to get into. But Dikshita's got his popular ones as well.
Yeah. Everything is not as cryptic as one.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful, Prashant.
I mean, going into a performance, I would say just the easiest thing is to first have this recognition or understanding of beingness that we talked about, and then ultimately, just when you go in, any of the kids listening or other artists, going in to perform, that it's just a field of pure being. So when you perform, you're not really a separate person making music for separate individuals, though it might seem like that on one level. But on a deeper level, which is more what we are, we're just it's just spontaneous arising of a shared experience, you could say. So even though you might feel, anyone might feel certain feelings when they're about to perform or go into a concert, can always just not focus on those with their awareness. So it's kind of like the awareness gets, a thought or a feeling arises and awareness attaches to that. So just resting and being and allowing the music to happen naturally. Not worrying about what anyone's going to think. That's tough to do, I know, but it does happen at some point.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of us suffer from, and with social media, there's that's another topic.
Oh yeah.
For us, more for the youth, because a lot of their self-worth is determined by their image on social media, right?
Mm-hmm.
My teenagers, they come to me and say, hey, you know what, I posted this and I only got 13 likes or 15 likes. Maybe I'm not singing it enough, or maybe I'm just not, I don't want to do it anymore, right? So
yeah, it's a lot of pressure. Well, I'll jokingly say, for anybody who's feeling bad about their social media profile, just go visit some of my profiles. You'll feel better about yourself instantly. That's why I still have them up there. So anyone feel bad about how many likes or whatever, just go to Prashant's profile and be like, oh man, hey, I'm doing better than this guy.
Yeah, I feel the same. But
then you'll be like, oh, yeah, I guess maybe I'm not so bad. Maybe I should just keep doing my thing, But I guess it just goes back, what I was mentioning, we got into before, which is just the trying to get some kind of accomplishment out of that thinking that we don't have the self-worth, from within ourselves, So you practice not attaching to arising thoughts and feelings, resting as the awareness regularly, you'll slowly not feel that the external happenings dictate, whether you're worth something, because your worth is self-evident by you existing. So that's also an important message for today's, anytime. But I think there is a pressure. I hear from some people telling me that they have to make themselves worth it, or something like you got to do something, and then make yourself of use or something like that, or like I'm not as good at doing this, so I'm not worth much, and so to that you should recognize that by the very fact that you exist is evidence that there is a lot of value, an infinite amount of potential value, and at the very baseline still it's an infinite level of value. So it's kind of like an ocean missing some of its water, if that person was not there. Or another example would be like if you had a blanket with the tapestries, with those little squares, and each and every being is one of those squares. So if one of them was not there, it would ruin the whole tapestry. if one of those squares,
it's a collective, right? We're a collective as opposed to individual squares, right? That's what you're trying to say.
The whole, the field of experience includes everyone. So if any one of us is missing from that, it's that's going to be a loss, on some level. So that's important today for people to recognize that, with that emphasis on social media, like you said.
Yeah, it's very difficult to not be affected by it in today's world. But at the same time, how do you develop tools to be able to cope with it? And I think the simplest is what you said, is you are who you are. You don't have to get somewhere to be who you are, or you don't have to do something, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I think it was someone had sent me an article about how for example, the dogs, our pets, give us so much joy, right? And they don't really do anything. They by virtue of existing, we're actually taking care of them. Right? You're actually taking care of them, but then they have so much value in your life, right? And they didn't need to create a social media account with 1 million followers to do that, to have that impact. And everyone that sees them,
they do.
Yeah, maybe the dogs need to have their own social media.
You won't believe it. Laya has an account, and Cash and Vedanta always asks, how many likes did Laya get today?
Oh yeah. You know what? You're right. A lot of people have media accounts for their dogs. Dress her up a little bit. Yeah.
But yeah, I think the basis is what you say. I think the craziness is leading is just spilling on to other things like pets. Now it goes on to something else and something else, right? So there's just no end to it, is what I'm saying. And the only way to end it is to just accept, is to surrender and say, this is who you are, and there's that peace, right? You don't have to look for it.
Exactly. So I mean, any of the happenings, whether in our internal landscape or the external landscape, it's always ongoing. Like you said, it's never ending. There's always the next and always the next. And so due to, by default, we get caught up in that, because we're kind of focused on that, the changing landscape in our internal and external. But when we recognize the source of that, so like I said, just going into the feeling of being, and then you recognize that all of that external stuff is actually based on this beingness here. And slowly there's a turnaround that takes place. And that also gives you a stable base. So I notice sometimes people say like, oh, if I go into this, then I'll stop doing everything, and I might, forget the world, or how will you do work? I've had people ask me like, well, if you want me to surrender to the awareness, like I have kids and I have a family to take care of and things like that. But what people don't realize is that what you're surrendering to, or in other words, what you're discovering, your own nature, what you're discovering about yourself, is actually the source of all of those things. So when you discover that, you actually drop into that source, which is the foundation for everything else. And so that gives you a great amount of strength, actually. and stability, and then also more energy, or you could say it gives you all the things that are needed for whatever you need to do. So you end up doing things much better than before. And if you're doing things with your mind or thoughts, that the thoughts, if you're following the thoughts as a normal way of functioning, it eventually, sooner or later, will cause unhappiness. It usually causes unhappiness on a moment by moment basis, but if people are like having a pretty good time following their thoughts, it's just a matter of time before they cause a problem. But your own being never causes a problem. So that's the fundamental difference there.
And you are your being, so how difficult is that, right? That's what
exactly. Yeah, that's what we already are.
It's like, I think Eckhart Tolle says this, where this beggar on the street is sitting on a chest and he's begging for 25 years. And then after 25 years, he realizes he opens the chest and this has all the stuff he needed.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. That's a great analogy. Just you're sitting on the gold mine, or so that's exactly what it is. It's like, when we're focusing on the different external activities to give us what we want when we already have what we want. So
yeah. So yeah, I think kids, if you're listening, that's it. That's all you need to know in life, pretty much, apart from the other 10 different things that you're doing. But
yeah,
you always know that that's the anchor to come back to. So
exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. So Prashant, what is a typical day like for you? So this podcast is about how, each of us makes choices in lives, right? Right now I'm on a diet and I'm trying to eat healthy.
Oh yeah.
So that's a choice that I make. I'm to eat, but I can choose what I eat.
Yeah.
And I don't really have to change what I've eaten before, but I have to just move it around a little bit.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
It's a choice, right? It's a choice that I'm making. So, or I choose to take Lyle for a walk. I'm just telling this in context of kids, and I choose to take my dog for a walk, and I feel the fresh air, and I can actually notice leaves and trees I've never seen before because of that choice that I make.
Yeah.
So on a day-to-day basis, Prashant, what is your day typically? Because I know you have kids, and so what's your day like?
Yeah, my day is definitely spend a lot of time with the kids. Monday through Friday, it's just kind of getting them to school, getting them back from school, different errands, things like that. But as far as and then of course teaching music lessons, I do a lot of teaching. Every couple of weeks I have a satsang. And just playing my instrument. Doing a lot of household chores, just very normal kind of things. I spend quite a lot of time with my I have two daughters. So one of them's in preschool right now, one is in grade school. Just doing different activities with them. Love to, like you said, love to go out in nature whenever I get a chance. Love going for walks. And just normal stuff like what everyone else would do. I don't have a typical day job, so I don't have a structured schedule aside from those things. So whatever I have something scheduled, that sort of gives structure to my day.
Now who's listening, who's jealous of that?
So yeah, but I also don't have like 10 cars or something like that, or the things that people may want with a very high-paying job or something.
And that's the choice you made, right?
That's the choice I made to some degree. The funny thing is what I recognized later is that I didn't have a choice at all. So on one layer of our conscious experience, we kind of make these choices, but what I discovered is that on a much, much deeper level, at the core of who we are, we've already kind of put ourselves on a trajectory to go through all the experiences that we really need to go through to, on the deepest way we can, discover what we are. So we're kind of already going through a ride It's kind of like going on a Disneyland ride or going on a cruise or something, like where you signed up for this. You're going into this series of experiences, which are a mix of good, bad, neutral, happy, fun, sad. But you're going through all these things to help you discover as much as you can, to the degree that you would like to, your fundamental nature. And that's how, when I look back at every turning point in my life, and everyone has had major turning points in their life, so I don't want to bore you with the details, but I found that all of those happened spontaneously. I was not, when those major turning points changed and the choices seemed to be made, I could feel that it was coming from a much deeper place than my normal thinking mind or my identity. So it was something was steering me in that direction. And so that's for major life things. I also find that on a day-to-day basis, that something is steering me on a day-to-day basis as well. So even this is like, you could say it's the awareness, the pure consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. But I find that each and every one of us is going through, like a flow, various activities which are set in motion very beautifully, similar to a very complex symphony, if you want to look at it at the separate individuals. Some days I might find, just as an example, you may, instead of doing something you were planning to do, something happened and you went and did something else, right? And then you ended up running into a particular person you haven't seen in 15 years or something. Things like that. And all of you can see this in your experience. I'm sure everyone has had those kind of experiences. The last time I saw my teacher, my guru Kadri Gopalnath sir, literally, if I had not gone to his house 30 seconds earlier, if I had been 30 seconds later, I would have not seen him. And that was the last time I saw him. And I still remember that experience as well. This is just one example of countless. Something made me call him, something made me get up out of the apartment I was in and just start walking. I happened to be in Chennai, and I just started walking, like, to find where his place. And that was also something was steering me. I didn't really plan it. So that's, so in addition to, the different things I enjoy doing, I like to do, or try to plan, for example, I might try to plan my day by, I have these few tasks, let me write them down. So I go through all the normal stuff. But I'm very, very clear that on an underlying level, fundamentally, there is a flow that's doing all of this. And so you find that, some things we plan to do don't happen. Some things we don't plan to do happen. and it always turns out just perfect.
I'm stumped.
What's that?
I'm stumped. I don't know what to say.
Well, I know it's a. See, one of the things when you go deeper into, when you go into your own being, you want to discover your own nature. One of the things to go is the sense of I am doing. So, the sense of control that I'm making the choice is very empowering. It's good. You are making the choice, but it's the deep awareness within you that's already made that choice.
Okay, I think I'm gonna have to change my podcast name. It's wonderful, Prasant. It's just wonderful. The way you said it's absolutely true, because it's true. I think this podcast is not about me, so I'm not going to say it. But
no, you can say. I'd love to hear about you.
Sure, but I don't think the listeners are going to care.
They will.
I think you're right. I think a lot of the things are out of our control. Not even I don't even like the word control, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's just that. So are you saying that things have like a fatalistic attitude, right? Are you saying that we are all here and we are on this journey that is being driven by this higher consciousness, and even though we think we are controlling our choices, and we're making all this plan.
It's not fatalistic because you recognize that what's driving it actually is you, but it's just not you what you thought you were. So the mind,
that's the
key. So it would be fatalistic if you resign that you're a separate individual and the thinking mind does everything. Then that would be fatalistic. But what you discover is that thinker, that individual thinker that we think we are, isn't making the choices. But that's not what we are anyway. So we go deeper into recognizing what we are, which is the source of everything. So it's like a beautiful symphony happening within you, and you're witnessing it. So then you see the whole picture. So normally what we're seeing now is one tiny part of a picture. So it's like if you look at a beautiful painting, and then you just zoom in on like one piece of grass, and there's an ant on the grass, and you're just looking at the ant's antenna. It's like that. That's how our individual mind is. And so we want it to go the way like this little ant should get everything it wants, But when you go into the source of what we are and you recognize what we are, then we see the whole picture. And then you see everything is happening together very beautifully. And so it's no longer about the individual. Now then you actually become very empowered as an individual to do whatever you need to do, because you see that there's no conflict anymore between the different beings or the different trajectories or different intentions.
What you just said, I was thinking about people who are struggling with, say, mental disorders, right? And so some of them are obviously chemical based, but this could be something that if they connect with, would they be able to get over it, right? Because right now our solution to everything is just medicine, pharmaceutical, everything, drugs, and I've been there. I was in the industry for 10, 12 years, and that's pretty much what we did on a day-to-day basis.
Wow,
right?
yeah.
Trials and but something like this, which is so simple, which is Bhagavan's teachings, but
Mm-hmm.
has it even been tried on I don't even want to say patients, but people who are suffering from something like that?
Generally, I don't know for sure, but it would benefit for sure anybody. But the institutions that are responsible for a lot of those, I think, are not focused on finding an internal solution. It's more about how can we treat the brain, like the physical brain, and administering medicines, like you said. And that will again just change their experiential texture, you could say. So it's kind of like if you have the ocean, the waves may be choppy, then they may be less choppy, but then that doesn't change the identity crisis of who we are. So all of the unhappy thoughts or the things which cause us suffering, it's fundamentally an identity crisis, because we see separation between us and others, and that in some way causes the difficulty. But everyone has to come to it in their own way,
Yeah.
And when the time is right, it usually shows up. It's kind of like a journey, which you go through this journey of being identified with the mind. And I think that it happens for a good reason, because when you get free of it, you're actually able to see it in hindsight in a different way than if you never had any suffering or you never had any confusion. So you're able to enjoy this manifestation and understand it in a different way. But yeah, I mean, if people could, I think I've heard a lot of, there's a lot of psychotherapy, and things like that. But the buck kind of stops where people want to, the whole thing that I am not limited by this separate body is kind of where the buck stops for a lot of people. A lot of people do not want to accept that there's something more than their physical body. So what to do? So the inquiry or exploring your own experience does result in that. But our institutions are not set up yet to recognize that that there is something more vast and deeper than simply what's associated with a physical body. And so that's kind of where science is rubbing up against now. But physics is a whole other thing, so maybe they'll discover something further to prove that. I've heard they've already proved some of those sort of things in physics. But I agree that even any tidbits of these understandings, if shared with people, would be extremely helpful.
Yeah.
So simple.
Yeah, and I think that's what is striking. Right?
Simply, the first thing I feel is helpful to tell anyone who's never been exposed to this or hasn't thought about it yet is to just give the idea that, you know, your thoughts are not true and your thoughts are not you. Those two things. So your arising thoughts
are not true and your thoughts are not you.
Yeah. So what awareness tends to do in an individual identity is it clings onto whatever is arising. So whatever is arising, let's say you have an ouchie in your hand, or you have someone said something mean to you and you feel bad about it. Those are arising in your experience, but you're aware of that. So what happens is there's there's a little mediator in between that jumps up and grabs onto that experience and says, "This is my experience. Makes me what I am. This is me." And that's basically what people generally refer to as the ego mind. So recognizing that if a thought arises, don't cling on to it. Notice that you're aware of that thought. Every experience is coming and going, has a beginning, middle, and end. So if you have an unpleasant experience, it's going to pass. You know, some of these little things, very easy for anyone to understand, including little kids. And if they have any habits that, you know, you can always tell them, for example, if they have a lying habit. I know of adults who have a lying habit. You know, it's not anyone's fault, but it's what will happen is that if he would like to explore one's own experience, so his own experience, he'll eventually see that he doesn't have to, right? So it'll fall away, basically, like whatever is not the feeling of being is so pure and enjoyable. It's so happy and it's so full that anything that comes in the way of that will just fall away. So the more and more we discover that feeling of just being what we are, the less and less the mental habits will be at the forefront. So yeah, I would just say regular exposure and just reminding. So in the beginning, it's first being exposed to it. So being exposed to it at a young age, very, very helpful, because a lot of the baggage comes on at, like, you know, if provided somebody doesn't have some major childhood traumas, the most in the modern world, you know, first world things are pretty good, you know, around 11, 12, 13, teen, you know, you start getting a lot of societal ideas and conflicts, things. So from a young age, if kids understand that the thoughts arising and how the mind works, what it tries to do, they understand that early, they'll be much better equipped for whatever's to come, and they won't take on unnecessary mental concepts that causes suffering and unhappiness.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, thank you so much, Prasant, for your deep insight into being and everything, really. It's always so calming and just it's so lovely just having your energy and talking to you. So I'm sure the listeners have learned a lot.
Thank you.
If you have any other words to share with us, thank you so much.
I think we covered a lot already, so thank you so much for having me. And yeah, we'll just remain in touch, and continue to enjoy. Hope you all have a great week, month, year, life.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to listen to Prasant's Satsangs, you can log into his YouTube channel. He also does in-person Satsangs, so I think that would be a great way to actually feel his energy in person. So please get in touch with him. I'll put links in our channel so you can get in touch with him. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ramya.